Some rivers carry water. This one has carried something else entirely, for nearly 3,000 years. Wade into its shallows today, in western Turkey, and the sand under your feet still glints, actual gold caught between the stones, for a reason nobody could ever quite explain. Until you know this story. This is the true story of King Midas, and the touch that gave him everything he ever wanted, and very nearly took away the one thing he actually needed. Not long after the world's greatest craftsman lost everything trying to fly, on the far side of the Aegean Sea, a very different kind of king was busy losing something too, without even noticing it was happening. King Midas ruled Phrygia, rich orchards, endless vineyards, and the finest rose garden anyone in the ancient world had ever planted. His palace overflowed with gold already, goblets, thrones, even the buttons on his own robes. By any honest measure, Midas had more than any 10 kings combined. And yet every single evening, counting his treasury by lamplight, Midas felt exactly one thing, reliably, without fail, that it still wasn't quite enough. His daughter Zoe understood something her clever father had never quite figured out. She'd rather chase butterflies barefoot through the roses than sit through one more banquet counting silverware. One warm morning, the palace gardeners found something unexpected asleep among the roses, an old satyr, small horns, a round belly, snoring loud enough to startle every bird in the garden. His name was Silenus, and he happened to be the oldest, closest companion of a god who was currently searching every corner of Phrygia for him. Midas could have had the trespasser thrown out. Most kings would have. Instead he did something that would end up mattering far more than he realized at the time. He simply invited him to breakfast. For 10 days, Silenus ate at the king's own table, told wildly exaggerated stories, and was treated like an honored guest rather than a mess to be swept away. On the 11th, Midas returned him safely to the god who'd been searching. That god arrived at the palace gates himself, and he was not remotely what anyone expected, young, laughing, crowned in ivy, trailing the smell of grapes and wood smoke. His name was Dionysus. Dionysus, god of wine and revelry, didn't forget a kindness easily, and 10 days of hospitality toward his oldest friend was a debt he had no intention of leaving unpaid. "Name anything you want," Dionysus told him, "and it's yours. One wish, granted completely, no argument, and absolutely no fine print." Most people, offered exactly one wish by an actual god, would take a long, careful moment to think it through. Midas did not take a long moment. Midas had been waiting his entire life for a question exactly like this one. "Grant that everything I touch turns to gold," he said, practically before Dionysus had even finished the sentence. Dionysus hesitated, just slightly, the way someone hesitates right before handing over the one thing they suspect you haven't fully thought through. "Are you certain?" he asked, only once. Midas was completely certain. "Consider it done," Dionysus said, and the strangest, most dangerous wish anyone had ever asked for was granted, just like that. Midas woke the next morning not entirely sure the whole thing had been real. He reached out, half-testing, and brushed the carved bedpost. It turned to gold beneath his fingers instantly, completely, the wood grain still visible in solid shining metal. He laughed out loud, actually laughed, and ran through the palace touching everything within reach, a chair, a doorknob, a marble step, a bowl of fruit on a side table. He ran out into the rose garden and touched the nearest bloom, just to see what would happen. The whole flower turned to gold in his palm, petals, stem, thorns and all, perfectly preserved, and perfectly, permanently still. Midas didn't notice that part yet. He was having far too much fun. By midday, half the palace gleamed gold, and Midas, giddy and starving from all that celebrating, finally sat down to breakfast. He picked up a piece of warm bread. It turned to solid gold in his hand before it ever reached his mouth. He tried a grape instead. Gold. A slice of roasted meat. Gold, and hard, and utterly inedible. He reached, in growing panic now, for his wine goblet. The wine itself turned solid and golden the instant it touched his lips. King Midas, the richest man alive, sat before a table piled with treasure, and realized, with a cold drop in his stomach, that he could not eat a single bite of it. Zoe found him like that, pale, shaking, staring at an untouched golden feast as though it might bite him. "Papa, what's wrong?" she asked, already crossing the room toward him, the way children do when someone they love looks frightened. "Wait," Midas said, "wait, don't," but the word came out half a second too late, and love, and habit, moved faster than any warning ever could. She threw her arms around him exactly the way she had 1,000 times before, wanting only to make her father feel better. And then, quite suddenly, and without a single sound, she simply wasn't a little girl anymore. Midas didn't move. Didn't breathe. Stood there with his arms still around a golden statue shaped exactly like his daughter, still warm at the edges where the change hadn't fully finished. Every gift he had ever wanted his entire life suddenly felt like exactly what it actually was, a curse, wearing gold's favorite disguise. He didn't touch another single thing in that palace. He was too afraid, now, of what his own hands might do next. The richest man alive sat down on a golden floor, beside a golden statue of the only thing he had never once wished for more of, and finally, quietly, wept. "Dionysus, help me," Midas called into the empty garden, his voice cracking on every word. "Please. Undo it. Take it all back." A god who grants a foolish wish doesn't usually grant a second one right afterward. But Dionysus had been watching from close by, and even gods can be moved by real grief. "You didn't ask for a curse," Dionysus told him gently. "You asked for gold, and never once thought about what gold actually does to the things that matter most. That isn't malice. That's just being human." "There is a way back," Dionysus said. "Not easy. Not free of consequence, the way real fixes almost never are. But there is a way. Travel to the river at the foot of Mount Molus," Dionysus told him. "Wash yourself in its current, all the way under, and let the water carry the gift back out of you." Midas ran the entire way there, carrying nothing, needing nothing but the one thing gold could no longer buy him back. He waded in fully clothed, crown and all, and pushed himself completely under the cold rushing current. The moment the water closed over him, something golden and heavy visibly lifted away, poured out through his fingertips and down into the current, gone. He surfaced gasping, ordinary, human, entirely his own again, and reached down, half expecting nothing, and closed his hand around a river stone. It stayed exactly what it was, a stone. The gold didn't vanish, though. It sank straight into the riverbed and settled there, and stayed. To this day, if you sift the sand of the river Pactolus, you will still find real flecks of it, glinting in the current. Midas ran home faster than he had ever run in his entire life, soaked, breathless, terrified of exactly one thing. He burst into the banquet hall and found the golden statue exactly where he had left it, arms still frozen mid-embrace. He touched it. Nothing left to lose now, and everything to hope for. His bare, ordinary, ungifted hand rested against cold gold, and waited. Warmth. Color. A small confused breath, and then Zoe blinked up at her father, as though she had simply been startled awake from a very long, very still dream. "Papa, why are you all wet?" she asked, and Midas, king of Phrygia, the richest man who had ever lived, held his very unrich, very ordinary, very alive daughter, and could not stop laughing through his tears. Midas gave the garden its living roses back, and never once wished for anything to turn to gold again, not even by accident, and not even as a joke. He still had treasure, plenty of it, gathered honestly over a long reign rather than conjured from one reckless wish. But he counted it differently now. Some evenings he skipped the treasury altogether, and sat instead in the rose garden with Zoe, watching ordinary sunlight do something gold never once managed, warm a person all the way through. The man who once believed more gold meant more happiness had learned, the hardest way there is, that the two were never actually the same thing at all. Wisdom, it turns out, doesn't always arrive and quietly stay put. Years later, Midas learned one more lesson, in a considerably more embarrassing fashion. The god Pan, playing simple reed pipes, once challenged the great god Apollo himself to a music contest, right there on the slopes of Mount Molus. Nearly everyone agreed Apollo's lyre was the more beautiful sound. Midas, listening nearby, was the one dissenting vote, and said so, loudly, to an actual god. Apollo didn't turn him to stone, or strike him with lightning. He simply decided that ears which couldn't appreciate real music didn't especially deserve to keep the shape of a man's ears. Midas went home that evening with a spectacular new pair of donkey's ears sticking straight up through his crown, and not one single idea how to explain them to anybody. He hid them under increasingly enormous hats for years, and only one person ever learned the truth, the poor royal barber, sworn to absolute secrecy on pain of the king's considerable displeasure. The barber, bursting with a secret he couldn't tell a single living soul, finally dug a hole in a riverbank and whispered it to the ground instead. "King Midas has donkey's ears," he said, and felt instantly, enormously better. Reeds grew from that spot soon after, and ever after, whenever the wind passed through them, they whispered the exact same thing, to absolutely anyone walking by. Midas, older now and considerably harder to embarrass than he used to be, just laughed when he finally heard about it. Some secrets, he'd learned, want to be told. Ollie doesn't think this story is really about gold at all, when you get right down to it. It's about the difference between wanting more, and having enough. Midas didn't wish for anything wicked. He just forgot, for one golden afternoon, that the people who hug you are worth more than anything your hands could ever hold on to instead. The richest touch in the world was never the one he wished for. It was the one he almost lost. And Ollie says our next story follows a curious box, a warning nobody quite manages to keep, and the very last thing left inside it once all the trouble finally got out, hope. Thank you so much for watching this 7th tale in our Greek mythology series. Until next time, keep watching, keep wondering, and we'll see you back on Mount Olympus very soon.